Welcome to our webinar today on the topic of creating a relevant culture. I am Deanna Laird with AccountingFly, and I am hosting this webinar where we will hear from Kristen Rampe, sharing her perspective and advice on what I'm sure we all agree is a very important topic. So before I introduce Kristen and hand it over to her, let me just preface with a little bit of housekeeping items just to make sure that you're all familiar with the webinar communication tool capabilities here. First off, if you have problems with your audio and you are listening to the audio through your computer, let me suggest that you can switch to a phone line, and that tends to give a little bit higher average quality and consistency. So again, if you're having problems with the audio, you can switch to a phone line so that perhaps it will help you hear better. And the way you do that is look at the webinar toolkit on probably the right-hand side of your computer. And if it's collapsed, you'll look for a small button that has an orange background and a white arrow. And that you can just click on that and it will expand the toolkit or toolbox for you. From there, you can click on audio, and then you can click on telephone, and it will provide you a phone number and access code that you can use to dial in. Okay, that will hopefully solve any audio problems that you may have if by chance you are experiencing that. Secondly, for interaction, right now the audience is muted just to cut down on background noise and other outside things that can kind of interrupt the overall listening quality. But you can still ask questions at any time, and we really encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. The way that you can ask questions is through a chat or a question panel, again in the webinar toolkit. So if you'll look at that toolkit, you'll see a section that's labeled questions. You can expand that and just type in whatever question you may have. You can type in comments as well. I will monitor those throughout the presentation and then ask them of Kristen towards the end of our session together. Okay, so let's practice that. One, I want to make sure that you know where to find that question panel, and also we'd love to hear about what position you currently hold. And if you will use the question panel now, just type in the position that you hold within your firm. You can use your title, or if you want to use a short descriptive, that'll be great. Again, in the question panel. And then this way it will help us understand who our audience is and help to, perhaps couch some of the presentation to better fit your background. All right, great. I see some of the answers coming in, and I will read those to you, Kristen, in just a few minutes as they're coming through. Okay, so that's really all the housekeeping items. And for the audience today, we have some bookkeepers, HR generalists, a firm administrator, office manager, recruiters, director of administration, HR assistants. So you can see a mix from HR managers in the recruiting area and professionals, accounting professionals themselves. Okay, so Kristen, hopefully that helps you.
Yeah,
and thank you everybody for giving us that information, and also hopefully it's helpful practice in the questions. All right, with that behind us, let me introduce Kristen. And Kristen, I'm so thankful that you're here and we have the opportunity to listen to you today. Kristen Rampe is a CPA with Big Four, boutique firm, and industry experience. She helps CPA firm leaders achieve their goals related to talent development, retention, generational diversity, and communication, so a wide variety of topics. She provides customized in-house workshops, consulting, and advisory services to CPA firms. You can check out our blog at KristenRampe.com, and I will provide that to you all in the chat panel so you'll have it handy. And there you can get great ideas on how to improve your practice and some thoughts around some activities and actions you can take. And today we're going to learn firsthand from Kristen so that we can really get her perspective, learn from her experience and some ideas around, creating a great culture for a work environment. And with Kristen, Kristen, I'm going to just hand this over to you. And remember, everybody, post your questions as we go throughout, and then I'll be back on a little bit later asking some of your questions to Kristen. Kristen, it's all yours now.
All right, thanks, Deanna, and welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have you here. I saw a preview of the registration list and was pleased to see a couple of familiar names. And I'm also excited because this time we've got the webcam going, so you get to see me more than just my slides, and I look a little bit like that picture down there. So anyway, glad to have you, and welcome to our webinar today on the humor account, where we are going to talk about building that great culture, and hopefully the headline caught you if you're interested in using humor and fun and other tactics like that to sort of develop the culture at your firm, within your practice, or within your department, because that will be one of the angles that we dive into today. For those of you who have been on my webinars before, you will be hopefully pleased to know that the first thing we're going to do, consistent with past history, is a quick fun Q&A. For those of you who are new to my webinars, just a little background on this. I like to do this is kind of an additional bio thing, something just to kind of tell you a little bit more about me and who I am. So we have 3 truths and a lie, and in a minute, Deanna will launch a polling question for you to actually answer these. But let's start off with some fun here. So which one of these do you think is not true? Did I not play the role of Nina from Office Space? You'll remember her. She was the corporate accounts payable Nina speaking. Skit in a skit at my firm. Or did I not convince accountants to play improv games during a CPE workshop? Did I not write an accounting humor book? Or have I not written satire articles about the accounting industry? So for some of you, you might know the answer. The other of you, you get to guess what you think it is. So Deanna, you can launch that polling question now. Everybody can practice the voting. And then we will see how this comes through.
Great. Okay, the questions are coming through, and it's interesting seeing the answers kind of flip-flop back and forth. So we have, the majority of you have voted. Let me give you about 5 more seconds to get your last-minute votes in.
And Deanna, okay, while they're voting, what would you, if you had to pick which one of these that you thought was false, what would be your vote, since you're on the line and I can actually talk with you?
Sure. And I guess I know a little bit about your background. So is that cheating? I don't know. But
that's okay. I don't think you know for sure the answer.
I don't know for sure the answer, but my best guess would be, Chris, you played a role of Office Space's Nina. So, but it's a hard one because I could kind of see all of these being a truth.
So 3 of them are true and 1's false. Which one do you think is false?
I mean, I think the one that's false is that you played a role of Office Space.
Oh, okay.
The first one, yes.
Got it. And it looks like you're in the majority, so we can look at those results.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I think we're ready to close.
Okay.
All right, and here we go. Okay. Hopefully everybody sees the results of the poll now.
Yeah, so it looks like we got 41% up in the Office Space role, 32% on the accounting humor book, and then a little bit on each of the other ones. So those of you in the 41%, you are correct. I have never played Office Space Nina, although that would be fun. I would actually try that at some point. But I have convinced accountants to play improv games. I have actually written satire articles about the accounting industry. Maybe you guys have read those, since that was the least popular guess. But in second place, I'm pleased to announce, and let's see, you can close the poll now. So in second place, just because I haven't had here, I did actually write, get that in light, an accounting humor book, believe it or not. I don't think very many people have done this, so it's kind of exciting, and I'm kind of proud of it. It's a bunch of accounting memes anyway. That is, in a way, to me, part of my street cred for doing a presentation on humor and culture, because it's filled with those things that happen at a CPA firm that are funny and amusing, but so true, you know, about how we work. And so I just had to get that down so that that actually happened. Okay, so now you know a little bit more about me, the kinds of things I get up to. Let's go on to the next slide, which I just previewed for you. But there's a new award out there. You know, accounting firms love awards. We've got all sorts of different things you can win. You can be a best firm at this or a top 100 firm at that. And there's a new one, and is the top 100 stodgiest firms award. So that's out there, and that's available. So finally now we have a venue to recognize those firms that are really resistant to change. Hopefully none of you are going to be up for that award, but it's available. And you know, one of the accounting publications will probably put it out, so keep your eye out for that. But because that is not the award that you actually want to win, whether or not you might place really high in the rankings today, let's talk a little bit about what we are going to do. So when we think about culture and we think about the different aspects of culture and why we have it, there are things going on in professional services firms today. We've got generational shifts, right? You've got the millennials. In fact, millennials all over the office, and we're not too long from getting that next generation starting to be in the office. And with that, there's a cultural shift. I was just talking with the managing partner of a firm yesterday, declaring that within probably, I'm going to say 20 years, it's going to be PJ Friday, right? That's going to happen. And everybody is shocked and sort of doesn't want to believe that it's actually happened and or is happy they're going to be retired by the time it happens, but it's coming. So things change as we get new generations into the office. Cultures start to shift. And when an organization keeps a culture that's from long, long ago, you know, and isn't sort of on that more cutting edge, you don't have to be bleeding edge, but isn't sort of looking forward to what do the people we're hiring today want? What is the type of environment that they want to work for? If we're not paying attention to that, then the culture can stagnate and become a less attractive place when you think about candidates and people that you want to recruit into your firm. So it's important to think about where are you today, where are you headed, and how does your culture play into that? I have a quick definition here for what is culture. It's the customs, the traditions, and the values of a particular group of people at a particular time. So it has to do with where we are today. And the culture of an organization could have been different 10 or 20 years ago, but because it has to do with who's there, what do they value, what are the things that you are actually doing in that organization, that's what really makes up your culture. So when we look for how we actually achieve that relevant culture and how do we stay on top of the goals that we also have at the same time, we have to look at the actions that we take to get there. So I put up a picture here, and you might not recognize this island, but that's okay because, excuse me, I will tell you what that island is. That is the island of accounting awesomeness right there. So take a good look at it. That's what it looks like when you've achieved accounting awesomeness and you're all on a great vacation. And one way to get to the island of accounting awesomeness, whatever it looks like for you, be it that beautiful tropical island or just a fabulous place to come to work that's great for the people who are there and for the people that you want to attract, is through culture, and it's through different aspects of culture. So that brings us to the next, kind of the first real polling question, and I only have 2 in here, so there's just 2 chances for you to give me some input, and again, this helps me sort of understand what's going on with those of you who are actually in the audience, and we can talk about top culture challenges. So Deanna, I will let you take it away to read and launch the question.
Sure thing. Okay, so in the next polling question, we want to know what is your top culture challenge. You'll be able to choose between convincing others at my firm that culture matters, or having other leaders see how our culture is outdated and needs improvement to recruit better candidates. Third choice is finding the right blend of culture initiatives that work for our firm, or including people from diverse backgrounds or personalities into one culture. And then lastly, if you have another challenge, you can submit that in that question panel that we've discussed previously. Okay? You ready for me to launch this poll, Kristen?
Yep, I am.
Okay. Okay, everybody go ahead and select your top culture challenge. finding this interesting, Kristen. I don't know if you are.
Yeah.
Okay. We have almost everybody voted. Anybody who's waiting? We have a couple more seconds here. All right.
And Deanna, I was just saying, while they're waiting, not that this necessarily applies to Accounting Fly, but if you think about kind of what you know about CPA firms, what do you think would be sort of a top challenge? I mean, now we have some results in front of us, but what do you hear CPA firms talking about as being their bigger culture challenge?
Yeah, I mean, what I hear, and also based on my experience, you know, I think a big challenge is having others see the culture as outdated and needing improvement. So, you know, I guess everybody has a different background and a different culture that they think is acceptable or fine, and sometimes we get so accustomed to a culture, maybe it becomes, you know, the norm, right, and just fine for us, that we may not see that, you know, it is a little bit outdated, or we have opportunities to make it even better. So that's one issue that I think I hear about and certainly have seen in action.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and it got a large percentage of our votes too. So let's take a look at that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and we'll share the results. Everyone can see kind of where the audience stands on this issue.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like we have the biggest group there, two popular ones, the biggest in finding the right blend of culture initiatives that work for our firm, and then the other one that got a lot of those votes is having others see how that culture is outdated and it needs some improvement. So that's good information for me as we go along. And certainly that blend is hard, you know, because because we typically have such diversity in our firms, what's fun for one person is not necessarily fun for the other person. So especially when it comes to those types of initiatives where you're actually sort of trying to get people to engage with each other in a more social way, that can be really challenging. And I've seen some of those types of excuse me, activities go really well at firms, and I've certainly seen my share of those that have flopped. You know, somebody thought this was a great idea, and turns out it kind of went nowhere. Okay, great. So we can close that poll, and I will go on. We're going to talk next about set components. And some of these, in the last section on fun and celebrations, that's where I'm going to spend most of the time diving deeper into that, but I'm going to cover briefly each of these other ones. And those of you who were interested in kind of learning about initiatives and things you can do, we'll have some specifics in that section. But each of these components, you know, from having that vision, the place you're coming from, solid leadership, honesty, stories and connections, and autonomy, all of those things play into your culture. Some of them are more easy to advertise and tout as part of your recruiting process, but all of them are important once a person is actually at that firm, and for your firm to be productive and efficient and happy employees and all of those things that we typically want in our organizations. So let's talk for a second about mission, vision, values, purpose. What are you working towards? Why is this important? When people feel like they have a place, that they belong in their organization and that they know where they're coming from, whichever of these you use, and most firms have a combination of them, that's what can ground people. And when you have leadership that's actually on board with it enough that you're willing to reference it often, and this can be done from a grassroots effort, but it also is really helpful if it comes from the top down, where somebody's saying, hey, remember, this is why we're here, this is why we're providing this level of service, or why we're adding that service line, or why we're letting our employees have half a day off before a holiday, because it's in line with our mission, our vision, and values. And that infiltrates a culture, and because the culture is bound together by people around these sort of common thoughts. So this is one of the important cornerstones of culture. The next two, leadership and transparency and honesty. I have seen a lot of firms where leadership, be it at that very top sort of managing partner, managing shareholder level, or just sort of the partner group as a whole, is I would say a little less, has a little less strength behind it than could really propel that firm to the next level. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a managing partner to get this message, because leadership can come from all levels of the organization. But when we have strong leaders in our departments, in our teams, on our projects, somebody who's willing to stand up and to take action and to send messages to their team, even if that message is like a delegation type of message, all of those components of leadership matter. And so the more places where we can see them infiltrate a culture, the more cohesive and stronger that culture is going to be. So that one is it's key. And that, you know, again, a lot of these, on the one hand, they go without saying. On the other hand, we need to talk about them to remember that they are important. And without these factors, culture and then therefore progress and effort can start to crumble. The next one is transparency and honesty. And these, lots of firms like to say, you know, we're really transparent, we're really open. And it's good to say that, especially if you are. But it's also interesting to see on what subjects are you really transparent and open, because some places you'll find, well, you know, when it comes to listening to our employees about what they want with our benefits, you know, we're really transparent and open. But when it comes to management's goals and leadership, you know, the things that we're trying to achieve as a sort of a firm overall, we're not so open. Maybe we're not really interested in sharing our goals for a firm as a whole. And these two, I put them together on the same slide, coupled with leadership. It matters, you know, your ability to say that. And again, in the attraction of candidates process, when you're out there talking with somebody and touting these things, making sure that they are really happening internally, because there's nothing, you know, more disappointing than thinking, gosh, I thought I was going to a really transparent organization, and then you show up and find out that maybe it's, you know, it's a lot of talk, but not as much action on that end. And that actually leads us to these two polling questions I put in are both right up front. So we've got the next one coming up, and it has to do with these topics. So I will, Deanna, I'll let you take this one away too, and then I'm going to kind of talk about the background of this question after you read it.
Sure. Now, did you have a slide you wanted to go to? Do you want me to read from?
Sorry about that. Yep, I sure do.
That's right.
Click over there. I'm looking at it on my notes, but there it is for everyone else to see.
If I could look over your shoulder at your notes, that would help.
Right.
All right, here we go. So the next polling question is, what trait is most important in your choice in following a leader? Is it someone who is forward-thinking, someone who is honest, or honesty as a trait, someone who can inspire and has inspiration, or competency? Okay. And Kristen, I'll now launch that poll so everybody can give their perspective. Okay.
Oh, this one's looking a lot more even than the other ones.
It is. It is. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
I will, as usual, ask you, Deanna, what would be your favorite?
I was about to jump in there because I knew you were going to ask me. Yeah. following suit. So, and you know, I think this is kind of hard because I think all of these traits are really important. But I guess for me, the foundation has to be honesty. You know, honest, like if someone's not honest, then can I put my faith in the inspiration that I'm being given, or the thoughts of, you know, where we're going to go in the future, in the competency? I guess, so I think as a first step, I think the honesty, the trust has to be there, and then these other traits can be very powerful and put my full, you know, full force and belief in them. So I would choose honesty.
Okay, great. Let's see what everyone else would choose.
Okay, here we go. I'm closing the poll, and let's look at the results here.
Okay, so we have, 40% honesty.
And I didn't look at when I gave my answer, I didn't look at how everybody else was voting, so there's some consistency.
Yeah, so 40% honesty, 28% inspiration, 20% forward thinking, and 12% competency. So the background on this question, there's a book called The Leadership Challenge, and in that book, or through the research that was done in creating that book, the authors surveyed a lot of people over a lot of times, and actually conducted the survey several times over many years, and they asked people to choose the top, I think they were asked to choose their top 7 traits that in the same kind of context would be most important in choosing a leader that they would actually follow. And as people made their choices, all 4 of these topics, all four of these traits were consistently chosen as the top ones out of their choice of 7 over several different survey periods, several different years, spanning several, at least 2 decades. So, you know, on the one hand, all of these are typically by, you know, the people that they surveyed seen as top traits for leaders. And then just to give you the results that they found, the one that was at the top of the list for most people was honesty, followed by forward thinking, then competency, then inspiration. That was sort of the shakedown for, again, most popular choices. But all 4 of these were in that, that kind of highest bucket for leadership. So, okay, so you can close the poll, and I'm going to talk just a little more about this before I change the slide. But let me go back to that slide. When you take this back to your firms, you know, and you get off this hour-long webinar today, thinking about how these traits play into your culture and where is the honesty taking place, and where else could we be a little bit more forthcoming. Inspiration, I really love to see, along with forward thinking. To me, those have some similar qualities that, again, at some firms being done really well, but at other firms, I know a lot of, especially smaller firms, where the top leadership, those that are really sort of running the organization, they're very busy serving their clients, you know, and making sure things are going along, and maybe even managing the IT system at the same time for really small firms. And they sometimes forget to spend a lot of time, A, just thinking about the future, and then B, taking the time to inspire their team for what are our goals, what are we trying to do, going back to that first piece of the culture puzzle. So these things are important in leadership. They are important traits that you want to be able to share with people who are coming into your firm about what we're doing and where we're trying to go. So I would say to you to ask for this stuff, or to bring it, you know, depending on your role at the firm, either to bring it to them or to ask them for it. And if you're working in an environment where it's easier for you to just work on change within your own group or your own team, try to bring these traits forwards to your team, right? Tell them where you want to go. Where do you want to take your group or your department? What are you trying to do? How can you inspire them? Be honest. And then ask if there are other people, you know, others sort of further up the food chain that you want to ask for their side of that story and the inspiration for a more global view of your practice so that yours can align with theirs. That's great. It's a great request, because the more those things get requested, the easier they become part of the culture. You know, gosh, people want to know where we're going. People want to be inspired, and even just asking can help move the needle on that a little bit. All right, let's move on to this next slide. So connections and stories, 2 other pieces of the puzzle on culture. This is where you are taking time to build that team and to make sure that people are actually talking to one another every once in a while. In the connections piece, more than once in a while is actually great. Encouraging the water cooler discussions, not to the point of losing a whole lot of productivity, but there is value in letting people have time to come together to have what we call non-work conversations, where they are, you know, not just allowed but encouraged. Again, not to derail chargeability and hours and utilization and all of that, but because with those deeper connections comes a stronger culture, becomes actually a more productive workforce. And related to connections stories, again, some individuals and some firms are great at this. Some could sort of use the inspiration to take it with them. But when you hear things that are going really well at your firm, or things that have gone wrong that you want to have not go wrong again, sharing those stories in a sort of story context is really important, and can actually do a great job of motivating and, again, binding your team in that culture of, hey, when somebody does something really great, we send out an email to their team, the department, to the managing partner with a CC to the staff about what a beautiful thing that they did for this particular client or on this project. So sharing those stories, again, just deepens your culture, and it gets people on board with what's important for your firm. And that goes back again to that first the first item that I was talking about in that culture wheel, which was, you know, the mission and the vision and the values. You can use the stories to connect to the values. And so it's not to say that your culture needs to be like this. We're not prescriptive in that sort of a way, but instead saying, here's what you want your culture to be. Okay, now let's share it and let's get these stories out there and the connections to people so they, again, can feel that it's really an important part of what they're doing. If everyone just goes back, you know, somebody does something good, goes back to their desk, nobody hears about it, not a big deal if it happens once or twice, but if those stories are never shared, you miss opportunities to bring people together and build connections around stories. One more slide before we get to kind of the fun and celebrations piece where I have even more info for you. This one is on autonomy, and this, especially for the generation that's coming in, it's sort of a delicate balance, because on the one hand, the staff that are joining your firm often need some hand-holding, maybe even a little more hand-holding than we really want to give them. But they're coming in, but they also want the ability to do things on their own and in their own way, and that actually gives people a sense of, you know, sense of their own purpose, a sense of self, and the sense of being able to accomplish something for the firm in their own way. Doesn't mean you don't still have metrics, things that you're measuring, productivity goals that you actually care about, but you want to let them have some choice in how they're doing it, right? Some of that looks like flex work arrangements, but other of that just looks like, I'm going to give you a project and you can make some of the choices on how to do it. So think about your practice and your firm, and where do you have and allow autonomy? Are there places where people are asking for it, whether or not they're asking explicitly? You know, can you sense that there's a need for that, and can you build that into your culture of letting people have enough control to feel like the professional that they are? All right, on to the last one, and again, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this one, fun and celebrations, and there are a few slides here. These are actually pages from my book, so you get a little preview of the types of things you might see in there. But fun and celebrations. So the last piece of that culture puzzle, and for those of you who are looking for sort of specific things you can do in initiatives, we're going to cover some of those here. We also have some annual meeting quiz show categories that you can check out that are kind of amusing. So first, let's talk about fun. Can you believe we're talking about fun and CPA firms at the same time? I can, and it's exciting for me. So there are different ways that we experience fun. We've got leisure, which is a state of mind, recreation, which is typically an activity, humor, a cognitive experience, and play, which is something that fosters exploration, and it allows for new experiences. So 4 different ways that we experience what I would call fun as a general thing, and why this matters for your firm. So you might be thinking, Kristen, that's great. You're telling me that we can have fun and we can have it in 4 different ways, but how am I actually going to, you know, what am I going to do with this at my firm? How are we going to code that time? And I know that you've seen things like this before, but I just want to be providing a lot of value on this webinar. So I have listed out the charge codes for the different components of fun, so you can go ahead and take a screenshot of that one. And the next time that you are laughing at Bill's jokes, you know that it goes to 5432. I should have made it 54321. That would have been even better for the humor charge code. Anyway, you're not really going to have charge codes like this at your firm, but it is fun to think about. And you know, there is a place for this. And I was speaking with a firm the other day about building relationships, right? And a lot of this can go into that building relationships category. And often people at firms think, well, I've got so much work to do. I have productivity goals. You know, client needs things. People in my office need things. How is it possible that I can add time into my day to talk with my client about the game the night before? I'm too busy to do that. But the reality is, if we're not taking the time to make those connections, and fun is one of the avenues, there are all sorts of avenues that you can use to do this, but if we're not taking the time to make those connections, your relationship is degrading, and that can have consequences on your ability to, say, recover if you do something incorrectly, or get additional business from your clients, or even just keep the business that you have. At some point, your client might decide that they just want to have somebody who cares a little bit more, that has the time and is willing to make the time to connect with them. So there is value in this. Again, you'll need your own charge codes instead of these, but they are a little bit of fun. So next up, I'm going to give you a quick quote that's related to play. And it says that play has become a dirty word for adults. It is synonymous with the frivolous, the pointless, and the non-productive. Yet anyone who really understands the role that play has in the life of children will understand that it's none of those things. And play is one of those words that, again, just as it says here, you know, if you go back to somebody and say, hey, we're going to incorporate play into the workday, they're going to look at you and say, no, you're not, because we're here to work. But where we can actually use this, right? So a takeaway for you today, where you can actually integrate play. You don't even have to use that word because people might get scared and not want to hear that word, is in brainstorming. And the word innovation comes around in a lot of business, and it certainly does in the CPA firm industry, is how are we innovating? How are we coming up with something new? Well, here's some information for you. It is hard to come up with anything new if we're always using the same tactics and the same practices to think about things as we have in the past, right? If you do what you've been doing, you're going to get what you keep getting. So in order to innovate, in order to think of new ideas, brainstorming and other activities like that need to take place. And play is a wonderful place to enhance your brainstorming, because you can actually encourage people to think about crazy, totally unrealistic ideas. But the point of that is that it actually takes them to a new place where they can start to think about crazy new ideas that might start to actually be realistic. But if you don't go far enough into the silliness aspect, your brain, it's like warming up before you do any sort of big physical exercise. If you don't do that warm up and you don't get yourself into a place where you feel, gosh, now I'm kind of in this creative, innovative mode, then you won't be there. You'll come up with the same ideas. It'll be the same dull conversation. So I encourage you to try adding some play, again, with or without that word, depending on the receptiveness of your audience, to when you're trying to come up with new concepts, new ideas, new ways of doing just about anything at your firms or in your practices. There's also the book I've listed here is where this quote is from, called Funny Business by Christopher Byrne, and he talks about the use of play in the workplace. So that's another resource for you. I had a workshop excuse me, the other day for a state society, and we actually went through a brainstorming exercise, and they were told not only to go for a high number of responses in a short period of time. I think they had to think of 50 answers to the topic, which I can't remember, but it was probably, you know, ways to incorporate new initiatives at your firm. And they were even given that stretch, because sometimes it's hard, especially for people who are really deep in technical problem solving all day, to get out of their comfort zone on that. And I said, I want you to have, you know, 5 ideas that incorporate Swiss cheese. And people look at me like, why would I incorporate Swiss cheese into these new initiatives at the firm? But the point is, you're going to incorporate Swiss cheese in the brainstorming process so that your brain can go new places, and then you may actually come up with great new ideas that are a little more practical, right? You probably aren't really going to use much Swiss cheese, but maybe you would. Okay, next one. One more quote here about the value of humor in this context. So this one says, humor's primary psychological role is as an emotional response or buffer to relieve physical stress. Moreover, laughter has been shown to stimulate a physiological effect that decreases stress hormones, and I'll let you read all about the technicals of the stress hormones. I would be surprised if there was anybody out there who says you don't have stress at your firm. To me, this, and this is from a research paper, it gives you permission to bring in the humor and to bring in the laughter into the workplace, to actually see it as an advantage and as something that you can do as part of your culture to bring into the workplace. Now, there aren't a lot of people that would say, oh, you know, we don't believe in laughing, we don't have any fun at the office, but this just, again, gives you more permission to bring it in and see the benefits of it in a balanced way, so that you've got both the fun and, of course, the work being done at the same time. Now, So that's great, Kristen. We're watching a webinar called The Humor Account, but how in the world can I actually convince somebody that we're going to go and integrate any of these cultural initiatives, because there's no way that it's going to benefit me, my bottom line, right? Any good business person at least has to have their eyes on the bottom line. But it can be profitable, and here's how fun contributes to profitability. So first, we start with the fun piece, right? We've got some play, which is creating innovation and creativity. We've got recreation. It's going to allow you to recharge. I'm sure many of you have some initiatives on that front, some humor, some laughter. All of those things come together to create a stronger culture where you have connection, you have communication, you have camaraderie. Probably have something else that starts with a C, like culture. We love alliterations. That builds your strong teams. Strong teams have strong performance, and as a result of that, you've got some actual practical reduced expenses. Turnover. There was an AICPA article written a few years back that did a calculation on what the cost of turnover is, and in their calculations they came to $32,000 per head for turnover. So if that's not a number worth reducing, and I know that's a challenge for all firms, disengagement, recruiting, healthcare, all of those costs can go down when you've got this sort of fun culture going on. So I would, on that note, I've got this next slide that says, so what's in your humor account? And I'd like you to take a second, and I'm going to be quiet for some kind of short period of time, which always feels a lot longer when you're on the end of a webinar and it's supposed to be the one talking. But think about what's in your humor account. If you have a little Post-it note next to you, or a piece of paper and a pen, and grab that. And I'd like to ask you to write down 3 things that is happening right now, kind of like, let's call it credits in your humor account. It's an asset account. What are 3 good things that are going on that are cultural assets? It doesn't all have to be humor related, but that are sort of in that fun bucket. And then below that, write down a few things that maybe are taking away from it, credits, things that are removing assets from your humor account. So I will, again, I'm going to be quiet for a second, have some water. You write a few things down for me, or check your email, which is, I know, what you're really going to do. Okay, so hopefully you wrote a couple things down, 1 or 2 things that you're doing, things that you could be doing, because they're important. And here are some, for those of you who want to have some ideas to take away with you on how you can add in more fun, how you can increase the balance in that humor account tomorrow. I have some ideas for you. The first one may be more of an affirmation than a new idea, but there was actually research done. I love that there's research done on play and humor. It makes my day. It warms my heart. But they were surveying different groups of people and trying to find out what activities are fun. What do people like to do? What do people, generally speaking, like to engage in? And everyone agreed that food-related activities are fun. So should you be having those team meals, the bagels, the donuts, the healthy smoothies? Keep doing that stuff. So people do like it for a reason, and keep it up. So don't eliminate the food. Don't eliminate the candy bowl either. That's always sort of depressing. But here are a couple more practical takeaways that you can take back with you on actual initiatives. And again, you're going to know what the mix is that works for your firm, but here are a few that I've seen work in other places. The first one is granting wishes, and I'll just describe these each briefly. I've got a link down there to my blog, and you can find this post that goes into these more detail. But granting wishes is where you get, you have people, give them a 3x5 card and give them a small budget, like $10 or less, and have them write down a wish, something that can be achieved for $10 or less, and those all go into a fishbowl, and then every week on Monday you pull out a card or 2, and then you or whoever it is that's kind of the organizer of this activity grants that wish. And it could be something like, I want the managing partner to go get me a grande latte, and I'm going to sit in his office and drink it or something for an hour. So again, things that are fun and interesting and might make other people enjoy their day a little bit more and doesn't have to be high cost. Order the Elephant is one of my most favorites. It's a great culture initiative. So you get some sort of semi-large stuffed animal or object, like big enough that when it sits on somebody's desk, you really notice it. And so in this case, it would be an elephant, but you could choose what the animal that you like. And the first person starts by giving that elephant to someone who did something really great. So this links in that stories component as well. So somebody who maybe did a really awesome job serving a client, went above and beyond, give them the elephant, tell them why they're getting it. They feel all fabulous that they're getting the elephant. You feel good that you're giving it to them. So now they've got this big object sitting on their desk or in their workspace. It is a little bit harder with the remote teams, but they've got something. And then what happens is people walk by and say, oh, hey, you got the elephant. Why'd you get the elephant? And then they have a card come back, oh, he went above and beyond and did this awesome task for them, and everyone brings that feel good and that fun into your culture as a practical thing. And then that person's job who has the elephant is at some point in time, they've got to find someone else to pass it on to recognize or reward them for doing a great job. So it's nice and self-perpetuating. It doesn't take a lot of administration on the part of the person or team that wants to have that be something that they organize for the firm. Third one, fun pranks. This also brings up the topic of fun for who. I am not advocating that you apply pranks to the grumpiest person in the office who would certainly not appreciate them. This is for people who you know would enjoy it. You've absolutely got to know your audience. Some people it's never appropriate, but for some people it is. Actually, just saw somebody posted on my Facebook feed that some guy, maybe it was in Italy, parked in a disabled spot and his car got like Post-it noted with blue Post-it notes and then white ones in the outline of the wheelchair, such that he couldn't drive until he at least took them off the windshields. That was probably not fun for him, but there are fun things you can do with Post-it notes for people who enjoy pranks. There's some ideas if you go look up that blog post. And then mock awards, and I've known several firms that have done this where you come up with sort of fun award categories, and it's usually a staff-based thing where people are joking around and giving each other awards. And what comes out of this one is usually people can't help but get into something that's actually very real and very good to be awarded. I ran this exercise on kind of a one-day event when I was working with an organization, and I said, you can give an award to anybody for anything, you just make it up. Whatever the topic that you want to give them an award on, go ahead and do it. And so they had to give the award, they had to have a title, and it was given to a specific individual, and then they had to write a brief description on what did that person actually do to deserve this. And they got some really thoughtful things, and again, building connections, building the team, deepening that culture so people feel like they're really a part of something special that they want to be a part of. So 4 ideas, 4 takeaways for you there. Go ahead and look up the blog or shoot me an email and I can send you the exact link to be able to find that, but it describes them in more detail. So let's talk for a minute then about attracting top talent with your culture, because that's what this comes down to. Is you want to build a culture for the people who are already there, but you also want to build something that's attractive to people who might consider joining your firm in the future. So some things that you need to do. First and foremost is getting that culture that top talent wants to be a part of. So that goes back to that first polling question, the first real one that we had of, those of you who said my biggest challenge is getting people to see that our culture is outdated. Try linking it to recruiting. Try linking it to what other firms are. Compare your metrics to, if you can get benchmarks of other firms of similar size, similar location, what are they doing, and see if you can, you can talk to enough people and get the inside scoop on what's going on at different firms. If you want to talk to me about that, I've got lots of scoops of what's going on at different firms, what seems to work and what doesn't. So first you need to actually get that culture or pieces, or start moving towards having that culture that the recruits want. And it doesn't have to be full-blown, but having a few pieces of it are really good. Then you need to share it. You need to put it out there, in certainly great places in your marketing, but also in your recruiting. So when you're talking to people, have either those on the recruiting team or those sort of in the interview process share the different things that go on at your firm that make it a great place to work, that really ignite that culture for you that may make them want to work in your organization. Also, to the extent that you can show your culture, if you've got the community service orientation that's popular, be out there. I know a lot of firms, when they send their staff on volunteering or other kind of community events, marketing loves to label them all over with the firm name. That's great. Get out there and have a team running the race, and you've all got matching shirts on, and maybe you stay together or maybe you don't, but it's a great opportunity to sort of advertise what you're doing and what your culture and what your firm is about. I would just say on this, be careful to be honest about it, again, because you don't want people to come in and find out, well, gosh, recruiting told me that, everybody has lunch together on Fridays and they all really love it. Well, I went to my first, 3 Friday lunches and everybody was really, sort of depressed and sad throughout the whole thing. So you've got to be careful that you're sharing the things that really are kind of genuine and true to your firm, and have been there and will be there when that person gets into your organization. So I have one more quick slide on things you can do from here, because I want to be sure we leave a little bit of time for some Q&A so I can actually answer some of the questions that you guys have. But one last thought here, I have a tip sheet on effective culture shifts, so if anybody on the webinar today is interested in that, go ahead and shoot me an email and I'd be happy to send you that tip sheet. It just gives you some ideas on how you can actually help shift your culture from what it is today to where you want it to be. Also, for fun, if anybody wants to, there's a what type of CPA are you quiz that is not the one that the AICPA put out. I think mine was first because it was a while ago. Anyway, it's fun, something you can do and pass around the office if you think your team would enjoy it. And then thirdly on this, let's talk about building the culture that you want. And I would be happy for anybody who's listening today, if you want to set up a call with me and talk about what you're trying to build and maybe some specific things that you could do based on your situation. I'd be happy to chat with you. You can email me at the same address above, so shoot me an email and we can talk about that and help you, again, get to the culture that you are after for the type of talent that you want to attract and retain at your firm, because it does look different for each location, each type of place that you're working. So with that, I encourage you to shoot questions over to me. I'm going to open up the question box. So if you've got any thoughts about what we talked about today or things that you'd like to know, shoot them into the Q&A box and I'd be happy to answer them. Let's see, I think I've got
Kristen, I've noticed, yeah, a couple of questions. They're both related to geographical challenges. So, maybe people who work at client sites or accounting offices that are across geographies. Right, and of course, you even referenced it, that can pose some challenges. So what's your advice to those who deal with kind of remote type situations?
Yeah, so when you're dealing with remote workers, be they just workers who are out in the field and not in the office very often, or those, I see someone here, I've got 9 geographical locations and how you're driving culture, there definitely has to be more of a virtual component to it, because that's just the digital age in which we live. I know some softwares, and there's certainly other ways of doing it, allow kind of, gaming and badges and connection. A lot of organizations use Slack now as one of the kind of tech tools you can use to get people together. But fostering that type of communication is important, and also bringing in some of the old school connection tools. So again, you're not all going to be able to go out for pizza if you're working in 4 different states, unless maybe once a year you get together, but maybe you don't even do that. But you can come together for web meetings and things like this, and I really encourage the video piece of it, whether you're all around a table together or you're doing a Google Hangouts and everybody's got their little picture. But the more you can actually see the people, the better those connections can become. And again, just seeing people visually and having a meeting isn't necessarily a culture initiative, but bringing in some of those other technologies and what can you do from rewards and badging that can go out through, a newsletter or competitions around different offices. Let's see who can create the funniest video about calculators. I don't know what the topic will be, but you get people to rally together and then, to look at what other people are doing, and it can be fun for them to do. So I think there are ways to do it. You've just got to have it be a bit more virtual than it can be when you're on site with somebody. And the same with folks working in the field. Get them into the office enough so that they become part of the culture, but still have some initiatives that make sense for them while they're out there. So some of those more virtual things that either fieldwork teams can do or individuals can do if they're in a almost always work from home environment where they can connect on something. And it does, the thing with those is it does take time, just like it does in the office, and it's going to take someone who you've said, hey, do the silly video about a calculator. It's going to take them some time to get that done, but you're going to have the culture reward, and the most important part of that is you're going to have the connection, right? People are suddenly going to feel like, I love where I work because A, they let me work at home or in a different state or whatever the situation is, but I'm still connected with them because we do these fun things together, even though they're more digital than they are face-to-face. So that would be my recommendation there.
Okay, Kristen, I have another question, and I think on the previous slide you related to, helping to push the culture that you or that we want. So how can you, help define the culture that you want and making sure that it's not that it's really representative of the firm as a whole, right? And kind of, I guess, a joint thinking, a joint agreement on that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because, and I had a really big you, and by you I sort of meant the firm as opposed to you personally, because we have all seen it go bad that, Sally gets elected the champion of fun, but the things that Sally thinks are fun are not fun to anybody else, and it's sort of a bomb and nobody wants it. A couple of things to think about in that realm. One is that you may have some kind of subcultures at your firm, and I'm not talking about countercultures, but groups of people who enjoy doing certain things together, and it may be more gathered along generational lines, and that's okay. To have, hey, all of our new staff love going to happy hour on Thursday, and that's kind of what they do, and that's their thing. And do all of the partners join them? No, and maybe the partners are golfing, so they can have their own separate things. But then together as a firm, where it's important to come together are on what I would say are sort of those more office-based, higher-level principles. So, like, how do we serve our clients as a cultural initiative? Is it something where our job is to be the best value, kind of like the low-price provider? So we're going to do everything we can to be efficient and save our client $1, and that's more important, even if it means our client might get something a little late or whatever. We are working towards the particular goal that we have of being a great low-cost provider to our clients. On the other end of that spectrum, you might have a firm that says, we are the boutique provider, you're going to get the Nordstrom's level of service, and so you can build a culture around that saying, hey, and it's about what you reward in the culture, right? Like, hey, great job saving your client $20 on that return or whatever by doing it a little bit quicker or by, skipping this, and I'm not talking about skipping on quality, but, getting something done a little bit faster. Somebody at the other firm might be rewarded for going above and beyond and spending all sorts of extra time, value-added time on a project because they knew that the client would really want this, nuanced thing. So again, you're rewarding the different things that line up with the culture, and I think it's important to have those discussions at a management and a leadership level. What is the tone that they're setting? What direction do they want the firm to head? Because when you get that together consistently, that's going to make the most progress. And it can be hard to, if those of you who are on this webinar really want to drive forward a culture of, say, that really boutique level client service, but you don't have the support of management, there might be another initiative that's better to focus your time on, because it is hard to support something when you don't have the support of leadership. So try to get together with management on what are the priorities, what do you want to reward from a culture perspective so that you're kind of having the behaviors that you want to see, and then working towards those goals together.
That's great. Okay. Well, we've actually reached the end of our hour already so quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar, keeping to our schedule. Before I do so, I will include my email address as well to everyone. If you have additional thoughts that you'd like to share or questions that you'd like to come up, and Kristen is now showing her email also, invite you to send us a note. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And Kristen, thank you so much. This was great. It was a lot of fun too. So a really nice, enjoyable hour. Appreciate it. And everybody for listening, thanks for being here. We hope you got a lot out of it. I'm sure you did. You know, we were glad you were here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.